Here's a quick lesson in how to write a concise story for the web. Journalists will all be familiar with the 6 W's in the inverted pyramid of news, but I'll explain them quickly. The 6 W's are who, what, where, when, why, and how. Rudyard Kipling called these 6 honest serving men in a poem he wrote for his daughter. I keep 6 honest serving men, they taught me all I knew. Their names are what and why and when, and how and where and who. Some people are taught the 5 W's, but I was taught the 6 because even though how ends with a W rather than starts with a W, that's accurate enough for journalism. It's worth noting that how is often how much or how many, especially in financial journalism. Online, these 6 W's are also the keywords that people might be searching for. Make sure they are your search engine optimization terms. The inverted pyramid of news is a method for writing the most important thing first and getting your facts in order of importance. At the end, you give background, additional information, and in newsprint, perhaps a pointer to more detailed coverage on other pages. On the web, the pointer could be links to other pages on your site, sections within the same page, or external links to source material and additional information. The inverted pyramid was vital in the old days because you could cut a story from the bottom. It is even more important online because most people want information quickly. They prefer not to scroll or need to be convinced to scroll. That means you need to convince them in the first few words and sentences that this is a web page in which they should invest time and effort. In general, the most important things involve who and what. The story might be who is doing what and where, or who is doing what when, or it might be how is who doing what, or why is who doing what. A financial story might be who is doing what for how much, or how is who doing what for how much. And there can often be lots of whos or hows or whys. You might have a story asking who is doing what to who and why, or how much is who charging who for what. In newsprint, a story is often written with scant detail in the first short sentence and then repeated with more detail in the second. So you might have, an 80-year-old lady driver killed a teenage boy yesterday when a wasp flew through the window of her car. And the second sentence would be, Hilda Smith, 80, killed teenager Timothy Jones, 16, in Acacia Drive, Lewisham at 3 p.m. Tuesday when a wasp flew through the window of her Hillman imp. Online, the first sentence is redundant. The second sentence contains the likely search terms that would be more likely to get clicked if it appeared in a Google search. People might search for Hilda Smith, 80, teenager, Timothy Jones, 16, Acacia Drive, Lewisham, wasp, Hillman imp. OK. In addition to the first sentence, I recommend also concentrating on your 3 main points. 3 is used in rhetoric, storytelling and famous phrases and saying. 3 of a kind, good things come in threes, faith, hope and charity and so on. 3 pieces of information is about all most people can take in one go and is more than enough to have a pub argument, which is all many web surfers want anyway. Before tablets and mobiles, which are the main way we look at the internet now, you would see the first 3 paragraphs on a web page without having to scroll. Even now, people decide very quickly whether or not to continue sliding their finger up their mobile screen. So concentrate on the first 3 things you need to say to get as much as possible in the story across. So we start with the 6 W's. Let's take the famous story of Lady Godiva. We answer those 6 W's and we get Lady Godiva rode naked through Coventry about 1035 AD to cut taxes. That's Lady Godiva who, rode, what, naked, how, through Coventry where, about 1035 AD when, to cut taxes, why. But that does not tell us the whole story. There are many more answers to the 6 W's. Let's start with what did she ride? It wasn't a bicycle or a motorbike or a scooter or a skateboard. It was a horse. This is important for the story, but also for search engine optimization because people are likely to type in the word horse when searching for this story. You can imagine a Google search for naked horse ride, and we want to be found. And thinking about search terms throws up another problem. Will people search for road or ride? Does our keyword need to be ride? So we have ride and now horse under what? We also need to think about when. If she had ridden naked at 11 p.m. on a Sunday night, it wouldn't have been much of a story, given streetlights were not invented and everyone would have been in bed since dusk. It is important to the story that she rode naked at midday on market day, the busiest day of the week when the town would be crowded, so that's another when. But why did she do it? Well, it was a dare from her husband Leofric, who was the Earl of Mercia and the Lord of Coventry. That's a what and a who. It also means it would be more accurate to say stop collecting the tax rather than to cut tax. Leofric was collecting the tax to fund King Canute's bodyguard. There's another who and a why, and Canute is sometimes spelt Cnut, so we need to use both spellings, at least as an extra SEO term. Canute is famous for telling the tide to go back. This was actually to prove that he was not as powerful as his courtiers claimed. That's a what, if a bit irrelevant. In fact, the tax had a name. It was a herregeld, a specific type of Dane girl brought by the Danish invaders. That's another what. Leofric dared his wife to ride naked on the promise that he would cut taxes. Why did the dare involve being naked? Because Greek and Roman art revered nudes, and Lady Godiva was a patron and sponsor of the local arts. That's another why. Obviously, Leofric thought Godiva would never do the ride through Coventry naked at midday on market day, so she surprised him when she did. Her long hair is said to have covered much of her body. It's a biblical reference from Corinthians, which is a what. But Godiva asked the people of Coventry not to look, so Coventry's residents are another who. They suffered from the collection of the tax. They stood to benefit from a tax cut. They were asked to stay indoors. But one man, a tailor called Peeping Tom, did look. And that's a what and a who. As a result, Peeping Tom was blinded by God, which is another what, and this caused Leofric to convert to Christianity, which is a what again. So, do we know if any of this story was true? Well, the story first appeared in Roger of Wendover's Flores Historiarum, published in 1235. It was popularised by his protégé Matthew Paris in his Chronica Majora of 1250. Paris changed the details of the protest from the general relief of the poor to specify the cutting of tax, because he personally disliked taxation. So that's some who's, what's, when's and why's. The original story did not mention Lady Godiva asking people not to look. That was added to attract religious tourists in the 14th century, which is another who and a when. Peeping Tom was added in the 17th century by the Puritans, rewriting history to show that prior to the Reformation, people had no morals and would have gawped at a naked lady instead of averting their eyes like the Puritans would. That's at least a who and a when. We know about Godiva from the Domesday Book, another what, and that her estates were worth £160, a how much. We know that in 1043 she and Leofric founded a Benedictine house of 24 monks on the site of St Osburgh's nunnery, which had earlier been destroyed by the invading Danes. Lady Godiva is said to have had her jewellery melted down to make crosses. This became Coventry's first cathedral, and its remains can be seen in Priory Row. So that's a lot of whens and wheres. Out of interest, there is a sculpture of Peeping Tom in the Cathedral Lanes shopping centre, so we have quite a lot of who's, what's, where's, when's, why's and how's. But let's think differently. Imagine we're working on a tax or accountancy website. Have we answered all the questions? We'd want to know how much the tax was. Well, it was a tax based on a hide of land, and a hide was enough to feed a family. The Abbey of Coventry, which had 24 monks, remember, had 3 hides, for example. There are records of how much tax was collected in total for Canute at various times. This is all in the how section as how much. Ideally, we want to put that in terms we understand today, which is harder as the amount of tax per hide varied and how the landowner extracted money from his serf tenants varied too. But it left people hungry and without food and was hugely unpopular. So let's call it a month's pay. That's another how much. Your tax watcher would also want to know if the tax protest worked. Well, Ranulph Higden's Polychronicon of about 1257 confirmed that Leofric stopped collecting all taxes except those on horses. This was such an amazing fact that it was later re-investigated and confirmed under an inquiry ordered by Edward I. His reign was 1272 to 1307. That's 2 who's and when's. Let's start again and imagine we are writing for a website aimed at 12 to 14-year-old girls who go horse riding. Have we answered all the questions? No. We need to know more about the horse. Godiva's horse was called Atheano. Atheano is a male name, so let's guess it was a stallion. It is often portrayed as grey or milky white, so that's a who and 2 what's. Horse riders would wanted to know how big it was. From statues, let's say it was 16 hands. Horses are measured in hands, and anything less than 14.3 hands is a pony. They would also want to know how Godiva rode, so let's go with side saddle to protect the dignity of the naked lady. There are reports she rode at a gallop. Those are hows. As you can see, When you ask those 6 questions, you often get a lot of answers. Let's decide what the most important of these answers are. We all have 6 already. Lady Godiva, ride, naked, Coventry, 1035 AD, to cut taxes. We also decided we needed horse in there for SEO. Actually, unless we know Godiva rode at midday on market day, the story makes little sense, so let's add that when. We need to say it was her husband collecting the tax, and we could throw in Peeping Tom who looked, and we could add that it was for King Canute's Herigeld tax. So now we try and join those key words with as few words as possible. That gives us Lady Godiva's naked Coventry horse ride at midday market day on 1035 AD, watched by Peeping Tom, stopped her husband Leofric collecting King Canute's Herigeld tax. What comes next? Let's explain the tax, the dare, and that Leofric did indeed cut the tax. That means we need Leofric and Godiva again from whom. Repetition is better than variation when it comes to search terms. We need dare, and we need that it was because of art, the art containing nudes and Godiva's connection with the arts. And we need the evidence that all the tax collection did stop. So that gives us Leofric dared Godiva to ride naked because she loved art, and Greek and Roman paintings included nudes. Ranulph Higden's Polychronicon 1257, an inquiry by Edward I 1272 to 1307, found that Leofric stopped collecting taxes except for those on horses. Lastly, we ought to cover the Peeping Tom story. Again, that means Godiva, but also Coventry's residence, and Peeping Tom from whom. From what, we need that Tom was a tailor, that Godiva asked the people not to look, but that one did and he was blinded by God. We can probably add that Leofric from who converted to Christianity. Join those together, we get Godiva asked Coventry's residents not to look. One man, a tailor called Peeping Tom, looked. He was blinded by God, leading Leofric to convert to Christianity. That's the story in a nutshell, in fewer than 100 words. There's plenty left over to either continue or break into chunks, with sections on the main players, or on the tax, or on horses, or on religion. If you worked on that horse website we talked about earlier, you would do the same thing, but make different choices about the most important keywords. You would probably still have Lady Godiva, Leofric, ride, horse, Coventry, and naked, but you'd also have Lady Godiva's horse Atheno, grey stallion, side saddled, gallop, and 16 hands high. That would give you famous naked horse rider Lady Godiva galloped her 16 hands grey stallion Atheno side saddle when she rode through Coventry after a dare from her husband Leofric. You would adjust your second and third paragraphs accordingly. If your website were about tax, you would concentrate on the tax points and perhaps begin Lady Godiva's naked horse ride stopped her husband Leofric collecting the Herigeld tax for King Canute, according to Ranulph Higden's Polychronicon 1257 and an inquiry by Edward I. And if you're a religious writer, you might look for the religious points and begin, religious Puritans claim that Lady Godiva's husband Leofric converted to Christianity because God blinded Peeping Tom for looking at the naked Godiva riding her horse through Coventry. Not one of those sentences is 30 words long. I'd say 30 words is a maximum for an intro part, and all sentences afterwards should be shorter. But if people read only your intro sentence, they should know more than before they read it. And crucially, they should know that this is a web page that has the information they were looking for. They should be prepared to scroll.